Okay, today we will be learning about the response to intervention, which is also known as RTI, and the referral process that is used by school districts. And I wanted to start off with a quote from our reading, which is, "Response to intervention integrates assessment and intervention within a multi-level prevention system to maximize student achievement and to reduce behavioral problems. With RTI, schools use data to identify students at risk for poor learning outcomes, monitor students' progress, provide evidence-based interventions, and adjust the intensity and nature of these interventions depending on a student's responsiveness and identify students with learning disabilities or other disabilities." And so basically RTI uses students' data, so it is evidence-based, to drive the learning outcomes and expectations of the students and to properly identify students as well. So there are different levels, as that quote did mention. So there are levels and tiers, and all of that has to be in process in order to make an intervention to RTI. So this little pyramid here shows the different levels. So the first one, which is down at the bottom, is the primary level. The second one, which is the middle one, is secondary level. And the top one is tertiary level. And that one is the intensive one. And we'll talk about those more in the upcoming slides. So in primary prevention, that makes accommodations for students. It is evidence-based as well. And it's differentiated learning for students, and that was, as you saw, in the lower level of the pyramid. And in secondary prevention, that was in the middle of the pyramid and also is evidence-based, so it uses data. It relies on small group instruction, so it stays away from whole group classroom instruction, and it makes accommodations for students as well, and it is an adult-led instruction too. And in tertiary prevention, that's smaller group size for students, so still staying away from whole classroom instruction. The sessions are more frequent, sessions are longer, and students are frequently monitored for progress throughout the year. So the tertiary prevention, as you can see, is a lot more intense than the secondary or the primary prevention. And how do we identify students, right? So it's important to make sure that you are using your evidence and data and all the tracking throughout the year and the sessions used for students in order to properly identify them, because you do not want to misidentify students. So struggling students will go through a two-stage screening process. Then a universal screening is implemented at the beginning of the year, followed with 2 or more screenings to properly identify students as risk. So there are several steps to take. This is not something that takes a short amount of time to do. So that way students are properly identified, and it is sure that the teachers are using data and their evidence in order to properly identify these students. So we're going to go on into the referral process. So as you can see, there's many steps into the referral process. So the first one would be recognition, and that recognition is just for us as teachers and to be able to recognize students' academic levels, their social levels, their behavioral issues as well, and any physical abilities or disabilities that they have. So in this one, this is when it's important for the school or the teacher to call a meeting with the parents or the guardians of the students as well. And that is when our evidence comes into play, because we would provide the parents with examples of the students' work and any type of help or any accommodations that the teacher may have already had. And the second step is the pre-referral process. And in this step, it's more formal, and it provides accommodations for students as well. So the pre-referral is meant to identify the student, to develop, and for us as teacher, implement some educational strategies for the students to have to help them in the classroom, because again, there are several steps before referring a student to special education. So these are what you call student-centered team. This is what the pre-referral process is implemented with. And then the next step is referrals for special education evaluation. And of course, this comes after the pre-referral. So these types of special education evaluations are by the school. So that would be like a gen ed teacher or a special education teacher, some administrators, counselors, and it involves the child's parents as well, um, or anyone that really is like the guardian of the child. And this process, this is when it begins to really start trying to identify the child to determine whether they are eligible for special education. And in phase 4, that's special education evaluation. So in this phase, you're using all the above steps in order to get down to this one. And this one is also a part of a team. And eligibility, that is also called Free Appropriate Public Education because it's part of FAPE, which is under the IDEA Act. So this is going to be for students with disabilities, and not all students are going to be eligible for this as well. This is why we need to have our data and our evidence for this. And this is where they start getting into their individualized educational program, which is also known as IEP, and that same team is formed here. And in phase 6, which is the IEP meeting, that would be the individualized educational program. So that is going to be really heavily involved with the parents in the school, and it gives the student special education services within the school as well, and provides accommodations. And testing, accommodations or special instructions. And there's always goals to be set in those as well. And then the next one would be implementation. And implementation is also still on campus with the same team. Parents are still involved, administrators are involved, teachers are involved, and they're using the IEP goals in order to determine the next steps, in order to determine what they need to be doing in the assessments or in coursework as well. And then it goes into implementation, which is still using that IEP and implementing the IEP as well. And the last one is reevaluation. So in the reevaluation, that's yearly. So the IEP team meets, and that's the purpose of really getting down to evaluate the IEP, whether it's been implemented, the evidence that the teachers have, data tracking, and the goals. And so that would be the entire referral process.